Close your eyes and imagine Africa in the late 1800s. The empires are vast, the kingdoms powerful, the trade routes buzzing with life. In West Africa, the Ashanti Empire is thriving, its warriors and traders building wealth. In southern Africa, the Zulu kingdom stands tall, fierce and disciplined. In the east, Ethiopia is defending its sovereignty, never conquered. Across the continent, rich cultures, languages and knowledge systems are flourishing. Now here's the twist. The Berlin Conference of 1884 never happens. No European powers carving borders with rulers and ink. No artificial lines splitting families, tribes and nations. No colonization. So what happens next? Africa would write its own story. Its kingdoms would evolve into modern nation-states much like Europe did. Imagine the Kingdom of Benin becoming a global art capital, exporting bronze works not as stolen relics in Western museums, but as celebrated masterpieces traded worldwide. The Mali Empire's legacy of universities and libraries might have expanded into African Ivy Leagues, teaching astronomy, philosophy, and medicine to students across the globe. What about the economy? Well, with Africa's gold, diamonds, oil, and fertile land untouched by colonial exploitation, the continent could have spearheaded its own industrial revolution. Lagos might rival London as a financial hub. Nairobi could stand shoulder to shoulder with New York as a center of trade. Imagine bullet trains crisscrossing the Sahara, linking bustling African megacities decades earlier than today. And culturally? Oh, the world would look very different. Instead of European explorers being remembered as discoverers, it might be African navigators charting trade routes across the Atlantic and Indian Oceans. African languages, Yoruba, Swahili, Amharic, Zulu, could have become global languages taught in schools alongside English, French, and Mandarin. The philosophies of the Akan, the oral histories of the griots, and the architecture of Great Zimbabwe might have shaped world thought, literature, and design. But wait, here's the catch. Would everything be perfect? Of course not. Power struggles are part of human history. Corruption and inequality don't vanish just because colonization never happened. Even in our real history, after independence, Africa saw leaders rise who promised greatness but delivered greed. Take Mobutu Sese Seko of Zaire. He ruled for over 30 years, living in palaces while ordinary citizens struggled. Robert Mugabe, once hailed as a liberator of Zimbabwe, later clung to power as his nation crumbled. Paul Biya has ruled Cameroon for more than 40 years, a human reminder that power, once grabbed, rarely lets go. These cautionary tales show us that even a free Africa would have wrestled with its own challenges. But here's where the what-if becomes powerful. Without the scars of colonization, the stolen wealth, the artificial borders, the imposed languages and systems, Africa might have had stronger foundations to resist those failures. Civil wars over drawn borders? Maybe avoided. Dependency on Western aid? Perhaps unnecessary. Instead of fighting to recover from trauma, Africa could have built on its own momentum. Now think about global politics. What if Africa entered the 20th century as an equal power bloc? The Cold War wouldn't just have been about the US and the Soviet Union. Africa might have stood as a third superpower, shaping alliances, negotiating peace, and controlling vital resources on its own terms. The United Nations Security Council might include Nigeria or Ethiopia as permanent members from the very beginning. And the cultural explosion? Imagine music. Jazz, blues, reggae, hip-hop, all rooted in African traditions, could have spread even more powerfully if Africa itself had been the cultural exporter rather than the diaspora alone. Afrobeats might not just dominate Spotify playlists today, it might have shaped global music a century ago. Fashion, food, philosophy, Africa would not be rediscovered. It would have been a world leader in style and thought all along. But let me throw a final curveball. If Africa was never colonized, how different would the West be? Europe's Industrial Revolution was fueled in part by Africa's stolen wealth, gold, ivory, rubber, people. Without that exploitation, would Europe have risen as fast? Would America have been the superpower it became without enslaved Africans building its foundation? Maybe the balance of global power would look completely different. So here we are, caught between two worlds, the Africa that is and the Africa that might have been. The truth? We'll never know exactly how the story would have played out. But one thing is clear, the loss was not just Africa's, it was the world's. Because when Africa was colonized, the world was robbed of the chance to see the full brilliance of its civilizations rise on their own terms. So I'll leave you with this. What if Africa was never colonized? And what if we, today, tried to rebuild the world with that same vision of equality, dignity, and possibility?